Good morning and welcome to Conference Conversations, an interactive online talk show where we discuss key issues and questions related to the work of the conference on the future of Europe on a regular basis. These conversations are organised under the auspices of the Conference Observatory, a joint initiative by the Bertelsmann Stiftung, the European Policy Centre, the King Baudouin Foundation and the Stiftung Mercator. And it aims to observe, critically analyse and inspire the deliberations of the conference and develop proposals to improve the EU's future participatory and democratic architecture. My name is Jacki Davis and I'll be moderating this entirely interactive discussion. And today we're going to focus on the role of citizens, of civil society and of young people in the conference. This a topic many of you told us you would like to focus on when we asked for your opinions at the end of previous conference conversations, and also, as you'll hear in a moment, a very timely time to be having this conversation. Just housekeeping before we start. It will be a totally interactive discussion with questions from me and later on, I hope all of you. You are muted for now. If you want to ask a question, you can either write it, use the Q&A box, not the chat box, the Q&A box, and please be as brief as possible so that I can see at a glance what your question is and who it's for. If you prefer to speak, you can click on the raised hands button, and when the time comes, I will allow you to talk. I won't ask you to turn your camera on to save time, to save technology. Let's keep it as simple as possible. Use the chat button if you're having IT issues and you need some help. And last of all, please do tweet out about what you're hearing today and use the hashtag conference conversations. So let me introduce our speakers today. I'm delighted to welcome Eva Maydell, MEP, who is President of the European Movement International. We have Leonie Martin, who is President of Young European Federalists, JEF Europe. Laura Sullivan, Executive Director of WeMove Europe. Antidia Citores, Spokesperson and Lobbying Manager at the Surfrider Foundation EU. And Georg, who is Associate Director at the EPC. A very warm welcome to you all. Before we get underway, panel, Georg, just bring us up to speed. We haven't met since July in conference conversations. We're going to have a lot more of these over the autumn. But where are we now in the whole process?
Thank you, Jacki, and good morning, everyone. I think it's indeed fair to say that this is a big moment for the conference. It'll be an important week that we've entered into, and that the stakes for the conference are getting higher. So starting with sort of the positive news, I think what we should be looking forward to this week is the start of the European Citizen Panel. So one of the main components of this conference. They will kick off their deliberations with the first 200 citizen meeting this Friday. So if you believe in participatory democracy, not as a replacement of representative democracy, but to complement it, this is no small thing. It's the first time we have this at the EU level. Obviously, some member states have done it with success, like Ireland, on issues like abortion, etc., but never the EU. So these citizens, they have been randomly selected. They are representative of Europeans at large, and they now got the license to deliberate, to discuss, and to propose. So you have a total of 4 panels, each with 200 citizens that will meet from now on until January, covering 4 themes: stronger economy and social justice, European democracy, values and rights, rule of law, climate change and environment, and EU in the world and migration. So I would say that,
as you say, George, but another big moment coming up also in early October, because we have a specific event dedicated to young people, don't we?
Absolutely. So you have a European youth event that is taking place on the 8th of October, which will also bring a lot of citizens into this discussion. But this will be citizens of the younger category. And I think, of course, that is very important given the views, the enthusiasm, the way they formulate their questions on the future of Europe. So I think the conference is very much alive and kicking, but with lots to prove. There are many dimensions to it. And much of the test of the conference in coming months will be about how they managed to bring these different elements together: the panels, the youth events, the plenary, etc.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we, you say it's alive and kicking. I'll be interested to know whether our panel agree, and how do we bring those things together? Because in the joint declaration that launched the conference, the signatories agreed, and I quote, to open a new space for debate with citizens to address Europe's challenges and priorities so that people from, quoting again, all walks of life and all corners of the Union, especially younger generations, can have their say on the future of Europe. But some have their doubts that this is what's really happening. Just a couple of quotes. Manon Aubry, who is co-chair of the Left Group in the European Parliament, pointing out that she put a figure of it of 0.005% of the European population have contributed to the digital platform, and said in a recent tweet, do you remember the conference, the great debate on the European Union wanted by Macron? We have just received the very rare first citizen contributions, and their analysis confirms the total absence of legitimacy of the process. And Alberto Alamano, the Jean Monnet professor in EU law at HEC Paris, said, the conference digital platform has thus far reached an infinitesimal percentage of citizens, and its ideas suggest it has been hijacked by the few. Will the randomly selected 800 EU citizens compensate for that? That's the promise, well, the bet of the Conference on the Future of Europe. So do our panels share those doubts, share that cynicism about the process that we're hearing there, or are they more enthusiastic and optimistic about the process? Eva, let me come to you first. And Eva, I know we've only got you with us for half an hour or so, so let me make the most of it. How important do you believe this conference is? And are you glass half full in terms of this moment that Georg is talking about, or more glass half empty, as we heard from those tweets? Where do you sit on that?
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having me. I would like to thank the EPC for setting up those events and for me being able to be one of the speakers. I've met part of the panel before and we've collaborated on various events, but the other part I haven't. So I'm very curious to listen also to the panel and all participants today. Let me tell you my view. I would make a parallel with the Olympic Games because they are the most important tournament, sports tournament that happens, and it's every 4 years. So I think if we look at the opportunities to change fundamentally the European Union, they're even rarer. So we've been preparing for this moment. We've been talking for this moment. So it's finally the time has come when, you know, this lengthy process could come up with some sort of solutions. And this time they are supposedly to be bottom-up solutions. So I think the Conference of the Future of Europe is the most important task in front of European societies. Apart from, you know, the key issues and problems we do work on every day and are part of our lives, the problem, I think, is that it can never become really the most important task for individual Europeans. This is why I think our task as policymakers is to, in a way, manage to reinvigorate the debate, to constantly find new and different ways to engage with citizens and organization in it. Otherwise, indeed, the debate will not be as valuable, will not be as far-reaching. And if I may, it all depends how you look at numbers. So the conference has reached about the online platform has reached about 2.5 million Europeans. Well, that is clearly beyond the Brussels bubble people. But is it enough? Well, yes, it can be much better, but we are still in the beginning of the process. So the question is, how can we accelerate the process so that we start fitting in opinions of Europeans earlier rather than later?
Thank you very much. Lots to come back to in our discussion. Leonie, you heard Eva there saying it should be. It's supposed to deliver bottom-up solutions, but she had a caveat to it about who we're actually reaching, who we're talking to. Are you among those who are enthusiastic about this process, or on behalf of young people, are you a little bit skeptical about it all?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation. In fact, I'm a bit two-faced about the conference. Before the pandemic already, it was clear to me, but also other members of my organization, you know, that there are crises in Europe that need to be solved on a long-term basis institutionally. and thus the conference is an opportunity. But what we can see right now, it's not like the golden ticket from Charlie and the Chocolate Company. It is not obviously guaranteed that it will bring about change. And it relies a lot on civil society and citizens coming in to provide this legitimacy that everyone's looking for perhaps the same ideas that have been already on the table for years. And this involvement is only there to a certain limit because people do not know about this. So what we now say as Jeff is essentially engage with it, but do it critically. Demand also from decision makers that they take our time very seriously and our credibility as well. If we're supposed to go to citizens and tell them like, you should definitely get involved in this. There will be, regardless of if you do expectation management to the best, there will be some high hopes that there will be change in Europe.
Yeah.
And if it ends up on being a small idea, then
so you can't raise expectations and then not meet them. That's a very important point. And the question will be how to do that. Can I ask you, Leonie, as Jeff, how actively and directly involved are you in inputting into the platform and so on? And have you been doing that outreach to your members to get involved?
Yes, thank you for that question, Jacki. So we've, on day one of the online platform, we thought, okay, we are part of Citizens. So we've uploaded 13 ideas. They're already based off our internal democracy, essentially. So the ABC of federalism, they're already on the platform. They are also rather popular, which is good to hear. We have a project that we run together with AEG, that's another big youth organization in Europe, called Next Chapter Europe, where we invite our local sections, so people on the ground, to organize consultations and to also reach out to people who usually do not deal with European affairs, explain, give context, and then go into the debates and collect these ideas.
So you're doing your best to get out there. Laura, from your perspective, and perhaps you could say 2 words about WeMove Europe. Some people won't be familiar with you, but are you engaging as an organization in this or not? And if not, why not? How optimistic, where do you stand on this great moment of opportunity? Or some people say gesture politics, it's involving the citizens, but it won't amount to very much. Where do you stand on that spectrum?
Thanks very much. So WeMove Europe is a campaigning organization that tries to encourage people to get as active as possible in Europe, on the European Union, on the politics and the policies all across the whole EU. And how we do that is by basically translating the Eurobabble into real stories that we hope people can engage with. So anything from the question of migration to climate change to workers' rights and so on and so forth. I have to say that as we move, we're also a little bit stuck in the middle because we want to feel excited about this. Let's face it, particularly the citizens panels, like this is a massive transnational experiment with so much potential to really, so many countries, so many languages, so many people involved. And in some ways it's being set up really well. But it feels like this whole thing, and this is why I think we are less engaged than I would like us to be, because so much is set up to be a vicious circle rather than a virtuous one. And that is because it's really guided by a lot of fear, a lot of competition, a lot of power games, as opposed to the hope, the excitement, the trust in European citizens, and really letting go. And in all of this, and in all the story of European democracy all along, it feels like there is this big fear of letting go of power, an idea that somehow more participatory democracy tools should be held back a bit because we just don't want to give too much power to that vis-a-vis representative.
Are you referring there to the great debate, one could say fight, that went on in setting up the conference over just what status the citizens panel's inputs would have, what status the final report would have? Are you talking about those mechanisms so it's not clear quite how all this input that they're seeking through the panels and so on will be used? Is that your concern when you talk about power games and battles?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the year it took to establish the leadership didn't breed much hope. But there's more to it than that. I mean, really, if this thing were to be really set up well, and there's some really good dimensions already when it comes to the citizens panels of doing this by sortition, but also in terms of setting up real deliberation and not just panels for questions and answers. But I think for the people involved in that, unless there is some kind of teeth to this thing, accountability, some kind of follow-up on what comes out of those conversations, it will feel like an entirely meaningless process that then, again, breeds more pessimism in how this could work going forward. It could be entirely different.
So it could actually turn out to backfire. If they don't get it right, it will have been more damaging than beneficial. We'll come back on how they can get that right in a bit. But Antidia, complete the picture for me, would you please, in terms of you as a foundation. You're very involved in oceans, in seas, in these sorts of issues. Are you actively engaging in the conference? And if you're not, why not? How do you see it?
Well, at this stage, we are not involved in the conference. Why? Because we already made a consultation like 2 years ago before the EU election that was dedicated to know the priority about ocean and citizens. And we get the voice heard from the ocean. And what I see from the first conference contribution online is the fact that environment is a growing issue that people is really interested in. On my side, I'm like Leonie. I'm a bit mitigated on the way I appreciate the starting of this conference. I think that the conference will be a success if there is a political will behind this to bring it to the mainstream medias, because I will be very curious to know among the participants and spectators today who is not part of the Brussels bubble and who is older than 30 years, just to know if there is really young people from everywhere in Europe listening to us. So now, on my side, on the way the conference promotes and perhaps on the way the platform is designed, I would be perhaps more confident on something that it's more attractive for young people that are in TikTok, in Instagram, on that kind of medias, and not really on conference platform as EU Commission. Nevertheless,
so just to understand, Antidia, you haven't got involved so far because you're not convinced that it is this broad debate. Is that the reason, or because you sound as if you see it as a potential opportunity?
Yes, we see the potential, and we will be committed in the citizen panels
Right.
on the field. I can say it like that, and perhaps less on the platform, using the results of the consultation we already made, because I also seen the topics and that you mentioned on the conference. Ocean is not there. There is environment, there is climate change, but there is no ocean, there is no blue in this participation ask for all the citizens. So at that stage, we are not participating and promoting, but from now till the 8th of October, we will be more active, and we are recruiting
and feeding in, as you say, the results of the work that you did. Georg, before I come back to Eva to react to all of that and give us her take, you said the stakes are getting higher. You sounded pretty positive about the process when you were describing to me the stage we're at. But do you share some of the concerns we've heard from the others about it could be great, it could be an important moment, but it may not, and indeed it could backfire?
I absolutely share those concerns. I think when you cited the criticism of Manon Aubry, who's the sort of co-chair of European Parliament's left group, saying that only 0.6% of the Europe's population has connected. And I think you use the term glass half full, half empty. I don't think that is a bit more than 0.5% by this stage is necessarily that bad. But I think the fundamental problem we're having here in this exercise is the classic EU predicament, which is the connection between national debates and European debates, between what happens in Germany when they're having election debates now, national elections. They had a big debate on TV last night. European issues, and even less so the conference, weren't really mentioned by a word. And that is really the problem we have, that we have wheels turning in the member states and wheels turning in Brussels, and they don't really connect. So I think that is absolutely a difficulty I see and share, but I would precisely say that if we want this to work out, then it's really the role of civil society organizations to help make that connection now, to engage, to pull people along, to be the channels through which concerns or dreams or ideas from across Europe are brought up to the European level, to Brussels. And of course, the panels themselves, they are a sort of a forced connection between the local, national level and Brussels. So that is also a very good thing. So that's why I wouldn't be all negative, but I absolutely share the concerns about the difficulties.
And Eva, you mentioned at the beginning when you talked about getting out of the Brussels bubble, and the concern really shared by everybody so far. And Georg saying, well, that's something civil society need to help us with. But I've also heard criticisms that the Commission is not publicising it itself directly widely enough, that parliamentarians could be doing more. What do you think? What is your answer to how we make sure this doesn't just become a debate of the usual suspects and we really engage that broader public?
Yeah, thank you, Jacki, and everyone else. Maybe just a couple of numbers again. Numbers are never really good for politicians to circulate around, but I think it's good to kind of understand also, how many people participating from each age group and so on. But just briefly, first of all, I need to say that from the idea of starting these conferences, and I mean, that's like the latest idea, the conference itself evolved quite a bit. I was also personally very skeptical and disappointed a couple of times. I think the emphasis on who's going to be the chair were not the right emphasis of the conference. But I think there was no foreseen citizens panel. And we in the EPP group, for example, asked very much to make sure that those citizens panels are included, and there is a concrete mechanism how the citizens panel will work, because now the panel recommendations will be deliberated, will be debated in the conference plenary. Then they would be fed in the conference report, and also more importantly constitute part of the conference output on which the basis the EU institutions will organize the follow-up. From each panel, citizens panel, there will be a citizens delegation that will be part of the conference plenary meetings. And then those citizens panel will actually lead to specific reports that are based on original citizens' idea as expressed during those deliberations. So I think that's a good step. And I think if this is put down, I think this could provide results. And I hope, it's to the scrutiny of each and every one of us that participates in one way or another to make sure that's possible. How many young people are participating in those citizens panels? Well, it's about 33%. So 800 citizens, 33% of those 800 citizens are between 16 and 25 years old. But we need to know that whatever age you are, you might have great ideas. And you could be younger or older or whatever background you have, you might have a great idea, or you might not have a great idea, or you might be active and not active. But still, I think there's a fair share of different measurements, the way those citizens panels were constructed. For me, the most important thing is actually, as it was also mentioned, is that the panels are indeed a little bit broad. And I think in order to be able to reach to citizens and penetrate areas that, maybe people are not interested in the Brussels debate, is to narrow further those discussions, is to make sure you ask the questions such as, what's the future of agriculture in Europe from your perspective? Or do we need more harmonization in education or skill training and so on? Just narrowing down and trying to, get more essence from the question, because what the future of Europe is to you, it's a very broad, it's a very general thing, even if it's in one area that could be environment. So I don't know how this could be done and if it's going to be done. And finally, on civil societies, one thing I've learned throughout the process while the conference was being set up is that policymakers and people that are based in institutions understand very little what is civil society. And the reason why I'm saying it's so convinced, it's kind of like I'm kind of saying, there has to be a better explanation to explain what civil society actually is doing and what's the outcome of the efforts of civil society. And I say it with a lot of passion because it also hurts because I'm, in a way also part of that sector. And I've understood that, people that work in institutions or policy and decision makers need to understand better, especially now, their role. And if the role of civil society is rightly played, so we could always say we are skeptical, we don't know how things will turn out, but actually if we try to do our best, maybe that would be also like a turning point for the way civil society is perceived by the institutions and by decision makers.
Yeah, Leonie
that's a separate point to keep.
Leonie wants to react to that. Leonie.
Definitely there's a role for civil society, and I'm also very happy that it's taken up in the conference plenary of those 8 seats, where we're also part of the Civil Society Convention with 5 of them. But I just want to make sure that we're aware that civil society is not automatically a service provider. Civil society brings a critical voice essentially to a debate. It can engage with citizens, etc., but it's not automatically the extended arm of institutions. And I think that's sort of the role that I can hear, at least in our organization, but also fellow civil society organizations, that it's coming here. We are engaging in this, also European institutions, but one thing that I wanted to point out is the member states. Because I've finally managed to travel to Berlin this summer, thank God for the COVID pass, and I saw one advertisement for the conference, and that was the European Parliament's office right in front of the Brandenburg Gate. When I was talking with my friends who are working in German politics, obviously they were very obsessed with the elections, but they had no clue what the conference is. Yeah. And how about, at one point we shape a week where all national parliaments, for instance, talk about the conference and make it actually an agenda item in the newspapers where governments actually invest in it. I saw there was a request in the German parliament to the government to ask them, what are you doing to promote the conference? And they are seriously answering with, we have put it on our website. Yeah. That can't be it, right?
So Leonie, and I know Laura, you want to come in, and I think Antidia also wants to come in. Don't put it all on us. It's not our job. We'll do our part. We believe in it, but it's not our job to deliver beyond the usual suspects. You have to do the homework too. Laura, would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I mean, my point goes towards the space for civil society. Well, where is it really, right? Because if you think of this 3-pronged thing of the plenary, the citizens panels, and the digital platform. On the citizens panels, to a certain extent, we have to back off and let that process happen with the 800 citizens that are involved. We cannot get too involved in that. When it comes to the plenary, I just don't see it. Where is our space? And when it comes to the digital platform, then there's accusations of, well, it's the usual suspects involved. So you're not supposed to be there either. And I'm just asking the question, where are we supposed to be? There's a great alliance, which WeMove Europe is part of. It's massive. It's called Citizens Takeover Europe. And if you take a look on citizenstakeover.eu, there are 10 principles set out for how to run this thing. And they're absolutely brilliant. And they're thought through from a very grounded perspective. It would be amazing. And we're not at the part of the dreams yet, but it's my dream that actually some of those running this take a look at those principles and let civil society in a bit more, because there's so much distrust that somehow civil society will only bring its own interests. But at the end of the day, we are every day, WeMove Europe is speaking to citizens, 1 million people across the European Union. So listen to that, treat it as legitimate.
Thank you. And Antidia, I know you also wanted to react, but let me also read a question that's specifically to you from our audience, from Katia Rebel, who says, do you think the approach to missions in Horizon Europe, e.g. the one on oceans, could be a way forward in terms of citizen engagement impacting on EU policies in the budget? How could those missions be connected to the conference debate? So making this part of a bigger conversation that the EU is having with its citizens. Your reaction to this discussion about your role and also to Katia's question. And then I want to come back to Eva before she has to leave us.
Thanks for this question, because yes, indeed, there is in those missions the will to have a link with citizen, and more than that, empowering citizen in the fact that they could participate to the decision making and the way they could find new project, new vision for Europe, and not just participating with application to Horizon Europe. So this is very part of the DNA of the missions. The Starfish mission on the ocean is very keen on having this citizen link with young people and facilitate also the way when you are in your curricula to make the link with EU and to make the link with the ocean for the Starfish mission. So this is part of the game, and I think that there is a kind of convergence between missions objective and this conference. The fact that there is a less connection between this conference and mission, I think is part of the testimony we can make it. Here there is a mission on one side and there is the conference on the other side, but the bridge between the two perspectives is to be built at this stage, and the mission will be published at the end of this month, and we have to create this, and this is a part of the civil society role, to have the possibility to make this bridge and to encourage people to participate in their own languages, and that is a very big point, and with their cultural aspect and cultural sensitivity on the way they want to bring subject at EU level. But those will and the impact of the civil society won't be enough important if we don't have the support of the member states, and I totally agree with Leonie, and if we don't have include the support of the presidencies of each country. We know
Absolutely.
that French presidency will be quite keen on involving younger people. There is many events that will be at the beginning of the presidency. We need the support for each presidency, for each MEP to involve young people, just for them to know what is EU.
Thank you. Georg, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to go straight to Eva because she's got to leave us soon. And Eva, a comment to what we've heard there, and also to this question that a lot of, I think Leonie, Laura and Antidia all raised at the beginning about expectations and their high hopes. And I link this to the comment about the role of member states, because what happens if it is a genuine bottom-up exercise of the type you talked about at the beginning, and then EU leaders say, yeah, well, we can't do that because that involves treaty change. Yeah, no, we can't do that. That goes far too far. We're not comfortable with that. We're not going to do that. Oh, and that, no, we can't do that. What happens if that is the end product? How do we avoid that?
Well, what happens is that if this happens, then European leaders will go against the wishes of European citizens. So I very much hope that they will be wise enough not to do that. But in the same time, I very much agree, and it's been part of my, shout out, that it does not have to be a Brussels exercise. We have to try and find different ways to move the debate to the member states, to the regions, not just to the capitals, to the regions, and try to talk Europe and to talk, how do citizens envisage their areas of expertise or their societies, how they have to live, and to discuss and to debate. As a member of the European Parliament, I humbly have to say I've been in a way doing that since I've been elected. So having, town hall meetings, meeting citizens is a norm, is not something that you do once a year or you just campaign on. And I would believe that is something that many of my colleagues do on a regular basis. It is indeed very often that you're confronted with very local questions or requests, and you need to find a way to connect them to the bigger picture, to the European picture. And I think it's a common exercise of how to make Europe, the Conference of the Future of Europe, more present into the national debate. And ideally, you need one or two local, regional, national leaders that would be passionate about the topic and that will dare include it in their agendas. Because the problem is that there are very often national politicians coming to Brussels. Some of them are not even saying that they're coming to Brussels because it's seen not in a good way back at their region or member states. With others, it's different. So it's very different, the perceptions. But I think it's a common effort from the institutions, from the people that work or are elected in this institution, and everybody participating in this conference. Because I don't want to be participating in something for a year and that it results that my time has been lost, even though I am an elected member. It will be the same for whoever participates. You want that this time is meaningful and that this conference leads to some sort of an outcome. So maybe I could just quickly share with 2 sentences what that outcome could be from my perspective, where I currently stand. And this could, of course, change because of the discussions and because of the debates that we are going to have. Well, one thing one could say is that ideally we'll further strengthen some of the most important things that we have managed to create, like, the single market. But for me, what would be important to strengthen is European problem-solving capacity. We have been witnessing a number of crises and difficult situations in recent times, and it has become clearer that what we need is more European actions in areas such as health or such as education. We want a Europe that's better prepared for the future, that can plan for the future, that when the next issue comes to us, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a debt crisis, whether it's a migration crisis, we can demonstrate that we are no longer surprised and unprepared for this crisis, but we are ready to act. We are better equipped, and we have the right resources, we have the right structures to be effective to tackle the next emergency, including the climate challenge, for example. We have to be an effective problem solver on the next crisis, and the forefront of these technological and environmental challenges that we're going to see even more in the coming years.
Thank you very much, Eva. So that's your vision for what should come out of this. I know you have to leave us. You have to catch a plane. I think you're off to Strasbourg to do your elected duty. So thank you so much for being with us today. We're very grateful and hope you'll come back and talk to us again at some point in the future. Laura, I know you wanted to come in and react, but I just wanted to bring Georg in at this point about this question of national champions. How do we get more active engagement? You raised the question, Georg, at the beginning about the link between the national debate and the European debate. What's your answer on that? And then I'll come back to the rest of our panel in terms of the things you think the conference should focus on. But Georg.
Well, I mean, the simple answer is that if national politicians don't take up this conference, if the leaders of the German parties that are bidding to become the next chancellor don't find it important to talk about Europe, and don't find it important to talk about the conference, we have a huge problem. And so, I mean, one can point to different actors. Obviously, there's the media, but the politicians themselves are the first responsible for the way our democracy is being run. So I think there's potentially a huge disappointment there. But I was quite interested also in what Eva was saying about problem-solving capacity, and also in the question that Antidia answered from one of the persons listening to us, and how this links up to Horizon's moonshot missions on oceans. And I think what this question poses or points to is that there are different legitimacies in Europe, and a lot of Europe's legitimacy is about output, about delivering on expectations, shows we can do things. And I think this is important to bring into the conversation also when we discuss the different aspects of the conference. It doesn't stand or fall on one thing. This is, when we talk about democracy in Europe, it's a complex web of different elements. And what I find very important is that we don't spend time talking down one or the other element, but rather that we collectively try to talk up the different elements. And I think exactly what Laura was saying was super important about civil society organizations and their participation on the platform. If we have reactions of people, including MEPs that I cited earlier, to say, well, these are the usual voices, well, that is the kind of reaction that serves to discredit the whole exercise and to discredit more broadly European democracy. I think that we need a balance, obviously, between participatory and representative. We need a balance between input legitimacy and output legitimacy. It's a complex picture. But I think what we need here is a little bit of positive engagement And there's a huge responsibility, of course, of all actors involved, and not least politicians at the national level to answer your question.
Thank you. And a comment, really, it's put as a question, but I think it's more of a comment because we have discussed the challenge here. Given the little knowledge at national level of the conference that you've all talked about, shouldn't the civil society organisations have a common coordinated approach in asking the EU institutions and national authorities to give more visibility to the conference? So you all need to get together and say, don't leave it all to us. You need to do more. But Laura, you wanted to come in, and then I want to hear from each of you in topic terms, where you picking up on whatever was saying, where you would like the focus to be. But Laura, you wanted to react to something Eva said, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So we go around in circles about this. How do you create a European debate? How do you get it beyond Brussels? And I think we always a bit simplistically come back to national champions, and it's one part of it, but it's not the only part. So at the risk of sounding like terribly promotional of the organization I work with, what we do on a weekly basis is try to put in place a few different things that actually get people involved in the European debate on an ongoing basis. Number one is don't talk about process, talk about what matters to people's lives. So talk about oceans, talk about how food is produced, talk about how women are treated in Europe, how migrants are treated in Europe, talk about issues that people care about one way or another. That's one way that you will actually trigger a debate, and then put Europe on after. Say, look, there is an opportunity to do this, so turn it around. The second is partners. So as WeMove, we work with loads of different partners at national and local level, who then spread the word amongst their constituencies. So it's not just about, the national level in terms of the politics and the administration, but beyond that. The third is the channels, which Antidia mentioned, around what are the channels that young people are using? What are the channels that my parents here, I'm visiting the home in the west of Ireland, what are they using? How are you going to get through to people? And the last one really is that message. If you really convey the message in technical terms, no one's going to get involved. But there is a way to do this, which doesn't just, rely on those national champions.
Thank you. Antidia, you mentioned there's no mention of oceans yet, but I mean, beyond your own issue, which clearly you'll be putting suggestions, you would like them to be taken up. Do you think the conference should be focusing and identifying a few things that really matter to ordinary citizens, or should it have a broader remit? And should it be focusing more, interestingly there, because Eva was focusing more on the how than the what. She wanted to talk about how do we become an effective problem solver. Others want to concentrate very much on the what, this policy area. And we've had on the online platform references to climate and the environment, you mentioned, to tech policy, education, democratic values, LGBT plus rights, everything. What do you think is the answer to this balance question?
I think that the approach of the conference and of the platform could be how EU is protecting citizens, protecting on the health part. I think there is many actuality on this. How is protecting our environment as citizens. So I think that the role of EU is not there as a topic. The fact that they could protect our culture is a way to promote our patrimony and also the way we do sport together and the way we think that young people could be the next generation to transmit this vision of Europe. And I think that perhaps something is missing here on the way we build together this common sense of what is EU and how it gives us benefits as a little citizen, as a civil society mobilization actor. Surfrider is that kind of organization that just try to explain the link between the citizen in its kitchen and what's going on in Brussels. And here, perhaps we need a focal point on the way that Brussels benefits to citizens, and it's not just pressure on citizens or more administrative or etc. So I think that is the first point. And on the second one, I think that if we want to talk about youth and with young people, youth should be part of the main topic. We want to bring. I know that there is culture, youth, sport. Perhaps we should need a very sensitive point on this because they will be the future. They will be the next one who elect. I hope they will vote for the next election. So just listen to them.
Leonie, presumably that's music to your ears in terms of where the focus should be. But in terms of topics, what would you identify as important, and would you focus more on the what or the how?
I was thinking a bit, hearing all the different arguments, but in a way it's more a how. The policy areas as such, they are important, but I mean, at the same time, the conference is not a black box. It does not happen, and everything is on stop. We still have legislative processes that can achieve specific things, and they should. But for me, it's more about, what are the expectations that citizens have for Europe? We've seen last year, pandemic, people directly go and watch, like, what does Europe do? Why does Europe allow that the borders are closed? Why doesn't Europe help in health challenges? Having to explain that, no, it's a different competence, etc. Apparently, in the head of people, this is a European competence. Climate change, for instance, the climate crisis. This is not something done on a national level, but people expect, what is Europe doing? This is actually where people pay attention. So here, I want to actually have more discussion. European foreign policy, also very crucial. Why is Europe just allowing Belarus to, do these things, and how does it work? Foreign policy, unanimity. It's getting a bit more processed, and I have the feeling that people are getting more of a taste of it. And here I think it's important to talk about the policy issues, but then also think about the procedure, because at the same time, here I come in as a federalist, we want this to be done on a democratic level. And to be able to do things on a European level in a democratic way, I do think we need to have treaty change. So there's a bit of policy, but there's an emphasis on the how as well.
And broadly, Georg, in terms of the impact all of this can have on future debate, because as a number of you have said, this can't just be a one-off exercise. However well or not so well it works, it is innovative, it is groundbreaking. Is this the start, do you think, of something really important in terms of democracy in Europe? And if it is, how can these guys who represent these vibrant communities with passion for change, how can they engage to make sure this isn't something that we see a report at the end of the conference and then we all say, well, that was very nice, thank you very much, and now let's go back to business as usual? How do you think, and what do they need to do to make sure that doesn't happen?
I think definitely this is the start of something new, and things will not be the same afterwards. Once you have had citizens panels and experimented with that, you can't just say, okay, that was good, put it back in the box and let's not do it again. So I think it's definitely the start of something new. I think also it would and should give very concrete follow-up. Not that long after the conference, the end of the conference, you will have European elections. So I very much hope that be it civil society organizations or MEPs running for office or the political parties, they will absolutely build on the conference to use that as a platform and as a laboratory for ideas and for political support for what they want to achieve. So I'm also quite hopeful on that front. Of course, it's going to be a long struggle, but it's not going to be this is not the last iteration, the last we see of this kind of exercises. I think there's no way back afterwards. So that's a positive. In terms of your previous question on sort of what should the focus be? Should it be on process or content? I would say I'm a little bit in both camps. For instance, I think on substance, the whole environmental and climate agenda has huge potential. I mean, we know that we have to put society through a transformation effort that we haven't seen in the past. Which is going to be extremely taxing and tolling and difficult for a number of actors, for citizens across society. And of course, doing this, it's not enough just to have the proposals Fit from 55 from the Commission discussed in Parliament, etc. You really need to talk through these issues and make sure that you manage to construct a just transition, and to make sure that when the electricity prices go up, that this is not only the price signal of change, and it doesn't become the signal of rejection. So it is really a democratic element to build around that super important transition, both in terms of climate and fighting it biodiversity, loss of biodiversity, etc., etc. But of course, I would also agree with what was said by Leonie and I think Eva before she left, that we have to use this exercise to change the process also. We have to use this exercise for the EU to be capable of delivering more and better and more with more legitimacy. So I would say that at the outcome of the conference, there's not only the European elections, there's not only politics, there's not only at the agendas of different organizations, there should also be treaty change. And I think that is definitely something that has to come into the discussion at different moments now of this conference.
I'm wondering your point about the European elections. To EU leaders, I said to Eva earlier, how do we stop that EU leaders just go, sorry, that's not a competence. No, we can't have treaty change. No, we can't do that. You put that political pressure on through elections and so on to make sure it doesn't happen. A thought from each of you quickly before we try and draw some conclusions on this question of, Georg just said there is no going back afterwards. Do you agree? And how do we make sure, Laura's nodding, how do we make sure there is no going back afterwards?
I can jump in there. So I very much agree. I feel that this wheel is turning now and it can't go backwards, particularly when it comes to for me, the most innovative part is the citizens panel. So you can't go back on that. It's the first massive transnational experiment and there's a lot of eyes looking at it. And, there have been the local and national experiments from which the EU can decide to learn loads or not. So this is an experiment, but let's make it the best possible experiment. I think that this thing has to absolutely keep moving. And yeah, there's a way to breathe more optimism and hope into this by setting this experiment up to work. And when it comes to it, the issues matter. I don't have anything to say on that. The 800 people have to decide at the beginning of that what really matters to them, I hope. But I hope that this can breathe, even if there are loads of problems with how this goes. It's an experiment, you can learn from it, bring it on to the next one, make it permanent.
Leonie, Antidia? Leonie.
Yes, fully agree with Laura. Adding on that, I'm actually looking forward to kind of see what the dynamic will be in the conference plenary, to see how national MPs, European MPs work together. Is this, one of the next building blocks towards a European political demos, for instance, that could create more attention also to European policy debates? So I do think it's a ghost that is out of the bottle, and now we need to see that the ghost actually becomes successful and promising and credible.
And you will hold them to account if it doesn't, presumably. Antidia, you would echo that, presumably. How do we make sure we don't go backwards?
I think that first we have to say that it's a very courageous initiative, because I think that no member state try to consult every French of its population to say, hey, what is your priority for the next mandate or for this mandate? So, and here we are 27 member states here. So first, this is a first experiment and very large and very ambitious. And how we make this as a success, I think that we could be perhaps more inclusive in the construction of that kind of consultation. So now we will get involved. We will try to give our little tools, inputs, outputs to all this, and perhaps have like a first step of what we could consider at the European democracy construction at this stage.
Thank you. We've talked about a lot of things in a great discussion over the last hour, but I want to put you all on the spot. And I want to ask you a question that I'm asking to all our panels at all our conference conversations. And to do this, I want to quote to you what European Commission Vice President and Conference Co-Chair Dubravka Šuica said in March. She said, "The conference will enable citizens from every corner of the EU and from all backgrounds to share their ideas, their hopes and their dreams in shaping their union's future as citizens." So take off your hat of representing your organizations. For you individually as citizens, and I'll start with Leonie, I'll go to Antidia, I'll go to Laura, and I'll finish with Georg. What is your dream outcome? The one thing you hope above all else, Leonie? We've talked about so many issues over the last hour, the what, the how. What is your dream for what comes out of all of this? You have 1 minute each. Leonie first.
1 minute. I would say chutzpah. I want to see chutzpah from the European leaders on, all of the leaders on different levels, essentially, to have a Europe that can actually tackle challenges. So for me, it's all combined in the word chutzpah and treaty change, essentially, for more democracy.
I like it. Thank you. Laura, your dream outcome.
Yeah, my dream is definitely with the citizens panels, that they become permanent, that they rotate. So there's no accusation possible that this is just an elite small group attending, but it keeps rolling. it gets better every time, and it influences decisions like, yeah, what happens to 750 billion the EU has for recovery, what's green and what's just. And related to that, that EU leaders really kick out the fear and distrust, fear around treaty change. There's a lot you can do without treaty change, fear of Euroscepticism. Well, if you don't let some of that in, and if you don't at least let constructive criticism in, you're just going to have that film, that Lego film, and everything is awesome. And we need to get over that in Europe. So that's
Thank you very much indeed. Antidia, your dream.
My dream would be that all the participants, and why not non-participants, feel like real or Europeans, part of a community who shares the same vision, or perhaps common part of this vision that would be sustainable for the next generation, and would be a part of leadership at international level that could bring other vision, other ideas to other continents. So my dream would be common feeling and leadership.
Thank you very much. Georg, do you have a dream?
I think I would put my dream in one word, enthusiasm. And I think that's a quote I'm borrowing from Albert Einstein, who said that enthusiasm was or is the most beautiful word we have across all European languages. And it comes from Greek, of course, and theos. So it's in a sort, it talks about the little God in us all, and the greatest potential we all have. So I think that would be a great outcome of the conference if it could participate in creating enthusiasm broadly, largely for participation in discussion and in forging Europe's common future.
Thank you. And that enthusiasm we've certainly seen over the last hour. And thank you for an uplifting end to our conversation and all your positive hopes for this process. But you've also helped to identify some of the really difficult issues that the conference, that EU leaders, member states need to wrestle with if they are to make sure it is a success and does not, as some of you have warned, lead to terrible disappointment for those who did engage. So thank you so much for a great discussion. That's all we have time for today. We will be back with the next conference conversations on September the 28th, when I'll be joined by Herman van Rompuy and Bridget Laffen, co-chairs of the high-level advisory group of the Conference Observatory. And in the meantime, as we've already heard today, the conference's deliberative dimension really kicks off now. The first panels, as we heard, this weekend in Strasbourg, and the observatory, living up to its name, will be there too. Do follow the observatory on Twitter to be kept constantly informed about its activities, get updates on what's happening at the conference and the observatory's own analysis of developments. And finally, in the spirit of participatory democracy, which is what this conference is all about, we at Conference Conversations, those of you who've joined us before will know we like to involve you in telling us what we should be talking about. So in a moment, you will see a pop-up question as you log off from Zoom, which will invite you to tell us what you want us to talk about next time or in subsequent conversations. So panel, thank you so much again. Audience, thank you to you for joining us today. Only remains for me to wish you a very pleasant rest of the day. Thank you, and bye-bye, everyone. Great.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you so much.